Hey guys, this is Dharmen Keshri. In this Fabric session, I'm going to talk about the Microsoft Fabric network security feature, Workspace Identity, which recently got announced in public preview. This feature allows you to securely access firewall-enabled Azure storage account in Microsoft Fabric. Given that this feature operates at a workspace level in Fabric, you can create a workspace identity at that level. It allows the workspace to function as a trusted workspace access. The trusted workspace access enables secure and seamless outbound connection to data stored in Azure storage account through Lakehouse shortcut in Fabric workspace without compromising performance or functionality of it. You can also utilize these shortcut tables within data pipeline or data flow gen 2 to streamline data movement into data warehouse or KQLDB. During the demo time, we will understand how this workspace identity works on a high level. But before we dive into the demo, let's first outline the essential technical prerequisites and limitations in the coming slides to ensure a smooth creation of workspace identity. As a part of prerequisites, you have to make sure workspace is associated with greater than equals to F64 SKU capacity, not with trial or less than F64 SKU capacity. User or service principal needs workspace level admin access to create or delete a workspace identity. The third one is the user or service principal creating the shortcut must have one of these RBAC roles on the storage account. And the last one, we are going to use ARM template to configure specific Fabric workspace for Azure storage account access based on the workspace identity. So here is the ARM template, which we will use to configure specific resource instance rule for Azure storage account access based on the workspace identity. You have to replace the dotted square box values with your storage account, subscription, resource group, tenant ID, and Fabric workspace ID details. Make sure you are not changing any value of the red highlighted square box. Now let's look at some of the key limitations and considerations of workspace identity, which might affect your use cases and workflows. As highlighted earlier, workspace must be associated with greater than equals to F64 SKU capacity, not with trial or less than F64 SKU capacity. Now, what happens if you have a workspace with a workspace identity, but it is migrated to a non-fabric, maybe P capacity or a capacity lower than F64? In this case, the identity won't be disabled or deleted, but fabric items relying on the workspace identity will stop working. The third item is Fabric tenant can only have 1000 workspace identity. Once this limit is reached, workspace identity must be deleted to create new one. Connections for trusted workspace access cannot be created or modified from Fabric portal setting, manage connections and gateways. To understand other limitations and consideration, I would request to go through these two blocks. Now let's dive into the demo. Now you can see I have already logged into Fabric portal, which is app.fabric.microsoft.com. Let's go to Azure portal to make sure I got right Fabric capacity to implement this feature. You can see I got two different app capacities to use. The first one is F2 capacity and the second one is F64 capacity. I'll go back to the Fabric portal. I'll click on Synapse Data Engineering Experience. Click on workspace. Let's create a new workspace called WS Identity and assign Fabric capacity, which is F2 capacity, and I'm going to apply this. Our workspace got created. Let's click on workspace settings and click on workspace identity. You can see this option is not enabled. The reason why, because we are assigning smaller than F64 capacity. That's why it is not enabled. To address this problem, I'm going to click on this premium and I'll change this capacity to F64 capacity and apply this. Now I'll click on workspace identity. Now you can see I can enable workspace identity. Basically, I can create it. Let's click on this to create it. By the time it is getting created, this is the workspace ID. You need to copy this and have it handy because you need this during your ARM template deployment. Once this workspace identity gets created, what you will see, it will give you the workspace identity GUID ID, and it will also tell you that it has workspace label contributor role access. Copy this identity GUID ID and I'll go to Azure portal and I'll search for Microsoft Intra ID and I'll click on enterprise applications. I'll paste it that workspace identity GUID ID here, and what you can see that there is a one service principal basically got created under your enterprise applications. And if I go back to Microsoft Intra ID and if I click on app registration, you can see this workspace is also registered as app under app registration. Now the question is, do we need to have some sort of permission at Microsoft Intra ID level to create, register, update the workspace name and identity? To answer this, let's look at the audit log of enterprise application. Now let's look at the recent 5 activities. So our focus is add application and add service principal. So I'm going to first click on add application timestamps. What you can see here, who initiated this add application activity? You can see this is Fabric Identity Management. And what is the target? You can see the target is the workspace which we created. So means when we created workspace identity, it basically comes to our Microsoft Intra ID where it creates the application. Basically, it register application under app registration and it also add a service principal under enterprise application. So when I click on this add service principal timestamps, you can see the initiator is again Fabric Identity Management and the target is the same workspace where we enabled workspace identity and it is a service principal type. Now the question is, what is this Fabric Identity Management? So to understand this, I will go back to enterprise applications again and I will remove this filter and I'll type Fabric Identity Management. So let's expand this. So this Fabric Identity Management Service Principal gets created in Microsoft Entra ID when you enable Power BI or Fabric application for your tenant. Microsoft applications such as Fabric or Power BI are referred to as a first-party application. These applications are owned by Microsoft and have certain deployment policy. It can be pre-authorized for certain permissions. As Fabric Identity Management application has automatically permission to create and modify application that it owns. So when we created Workspace Identity at Fabric Workspace level, the Microsoft Fabric Application Identity create and register the workspace name and identity into Microsoft Intra ID. So basically we don't need to give any sort of additional permission to user or service principal who is creating this workspace identity. Now I will go back to the Fabric portal and now I'm going to create Lake House. I'm going to give the name LH1. And by the time it is getting created, let's go to our Azure storage account and click on storage account. We are going to use level of Fabric storage account. And if I click on the container, you can see I have two containers. I'm going to use AdventureWorks container. We need this container properties during creation of shortcut table. So you can copy this path and you need to replace this blob with DFS. So I'm going to copy this and you also need the folder which we are going to use as a shortcut. So this folder is basically containing our Parquet file. Now let's go back to storage account. Let's check the other settings like networking. So you can see this storage account as of now is enabled for all the networks. I'm going to enable for selected virtual networks and IPs. So I'll click this option and click on save. And you have to have this resource name, the location of the storage account, and then subscription ID handy because you need this information again when you are deploying your ARM template. In addition to this, if you remember, I mentioned that we need to have the user or service principal creating the shortcut must have one of these RBAC roles on the storage account. So we need to give at least one of the RBAC permission to storage account. So I'm going to give storage blob data contributor access. So I'll go to access control and I'll click on add role assignment. I'll search storage blob data contributor and select next. Select the member. So I'll select the user to whom I want to assign it. Select this and assign it. Now we need to deploy ARM template to configure resource instance rule for Azure storage account access based on the workspace identity. To do that, we will click on home page and click on create resource. Click on template deployment. Now select this build your own template in editor. So here is the template which is available on Microsoft Online documentation. To speed up the things, what I have done, I have pre-built this template by replacing the values and I'm going to paste it here. And I will just replace the workspace ID, which is, this is the workspace ID which we are going to use it. And let's save this. And I'll select the same resource group where my storage account is deployed, which is rg-hackbox. And click review and create. Now let's go back to the storage account. And when I click on level of Fabric storage account, and if I click on networking, and we can see that the resource instance rule got created. This is the workspace GUID ID. We can see it here, which is ending 8B56, which is ending here 8B56. So as it is not enabled for public, let's try to access one of the container. Can we access? No, we cannot access that container. Now I'll go back to my fabric, click on these three dots, select new shortcut, select Azure ADLS storage Gen 2, give the URL name. So we can, in the past, I have already created this connection. That's why it is automatically identifying. If you want to create your own, you can click on this connection and then you can just give it, I'm going to give a new connection name. So let's put it WS identity underscore con underscore v1. And I want to authenticate using organization account. So I'll click on sign in. And you can see the new connection got created. Hit next. I'll give my shortcut table name and the container path. And if I read the data, I'll go to new notebook. It is going to create a notebook and going to fire a PySpark code to read the data. So I'll click on this. And here is the code which I was talking about. Let's click on the cell and it is going to start the session and then execute the query. Now we can securely bring the data from ADLS to Fabric using Workspace Identity. Let's go to the Workspace and I'm going to create a pipeline. Let's add copy activity to the canvas and I'm going to select the source to my Workspace Lakehouse. This is my Lakehouse name, and I can go and select the under tables. I can select the shortcut table. And if I click on preview data, you can see that I can read shortcut table data using copy activity also. With this, I'll conclude my video. Thank you so much for watching it.